always had an interest in animals, and I think I inherited that from my mother, who also did. I think she should have been a veterinarian, but with World War II interrupting her life, things didn't go the way she had planned. But she engendered in me a love for animals, and you know, as an example of that, I learned later, much later, that she was afraid of snakes. But she had taken me to a science museum where there was an exhibit with snake handling, and you know, children could pet snakes, and there was talks about snakes and their biology. And so from that I loved snakes, and so I really admire that in her, that she saw past her own fear and was willing to teach me something positive about snakes. And she was one of the first persons too that I don't know if you remember, when was it, the shark attack movies, what were they called?
Jaws.
Jaws, yes, Jaws, and the family of Jaws that followed that. But of course there was so much hatred against sharks at that time that people started even hunting sharks. And she was one of the first persons that expressed to me sympathy for sharks, and that, you know, how important they were. So I really admired her sense about animals, and animals in the world as well as animals in our family, and I think that inspired me to become a veterinarian.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up south of Boston.
So I'm imagining not a rural.
It was suburban. We had a chance to ride horses, and that was my, again, a parent's gift to the children, that we had riding lessons. But we were primarily suburban. But I decided when I was going to go to veterinary school, and I was at Vassar College at the time, that I realized I needed to have farm experience. So this was the days before the internet, you know, and before email. So I found out about a family, I think through a connection of another student at Vassar who lived in Vermont, and I wrote to that family and I said I would like to be a farm worker that next summer on your farm, if I may. No salary, whatever, just to live there and work. And they politely wrote me back and said, we're very sorry, but for whatever reason. And they said, but we know of another family you might write to. And I wrote to them. And then, you know, this is all happening at a snail's pace that would happen with electrons flying these days. But they wrote back and said, no, I'm sorry, for various reasons, we can't do this, but try this family. And so I think about 3 or 4 families in, I found...
Nobody wanted the college girl from Vassar.
Well, that, and you know, like we have like teenage sons, we don't really necessarily want a girl here. You know, all kinds of reasons, and they're very understandable, of course. But I eventually found a pair of ladies. One of them was an emeritus professor of philosophy, and her student, or former student, because they were now probably 50 and 70s, you know, at that time, they owned and operated a farm together. And actually the philosopher would write all night long. She didn't really do any farm work. She enjoyed the farm, and the student was the manager. And so it was a dairy farm. So they took in students from the University of Vermont, and there were several students who were more interested in agronomy than I was. I was interested in the cattle. So my job was to get up at 4:30 in the morning, feed the cattle, you know, milk and so forth, and I had a ball. And so that gave me the farming experience that balanced the suburban life of like a small animal clinic experience.
Do you remember what your expectations were before you went on the farm, and then how reality?
No, you know what, I think I'm intrinsically adaptable. And I think that's actually a message that probably teachers, I remember my parents saying that one time they went to a parent-teachers conference, and the teacher said, well, she's adaptable. And I think that could be on my gravestone. But no, I'll go in open-hearted, open-minded into any situation, and appreciate the points of view, appreciate the kind of information, and appreciate the worldview that those people have. But of course that wasn't a typical farming experience because of the ladies that ran the operation. They were very high-minded individuals. Reading, science, animals. I was the kind of kid, before high school, would catch pollywogs. I would even catch honeybees until one of them stung me, and I thought, well, that was not such a good idea. But I really, I enjoyed bicycling from town to town even. You know, we had freedoms back then that oftentimes kids don't enjoy today. And I would say a great thing was that my parents fostered a sense of independence in us. You know, that I could take my bike and go anywhere and not show up until dinner time was an amazing thing. We didn't have the menagerie that you might expect, but we had a couple Siamese cats and then later dogs, and then my mother would rescue injured birds. You know, it was almost like preordained. I didn't want to be anything else. And I heard it one time said that whatever your passion is at 5 years age is probably what you should be in life. I was a resident of Massachusetts, and at that time, Tufts University did not have a veterinary school. And so one had to literally carpetbag, is the old expression, to go to different states that had a veterinary school. So I applied to Cornell, applied to UPenn, and got on a waiting list for UPenn, but didn't go any further than that. So I realized that it was a matter of changing residences to a state that had a school, and I was accepted at University of Illinois to do work in biochemistry. And so I did that for a year and then transferred over to the veterinary school. So I was very committed to go to veterinary school. There was just no other alternative. You know, I had volunteered at a local veterinary practice, and I thought, well, that's the work I want to do. But once I got into veterinary school, I realized I wasn't sure that I really wanted to be a clinician, or at least in a small animal practice. I realized that the routine of, let's say, vaccinations or flea control or spays and neuters might not be very fulfilling for me. Although, you know, I'm delighted that others find fulfillment in that, because after all, I take my cats to a small animal clinic, and I really admire the veterinarian who I take my animals to. But I realized I needed something different, and I thought about research at the time because of my background in biochemistry and also having done some postgraduate work, that I decided that might be the alternative. You see, I think at that time, people thought of veterinarians only as animal doctors, but there were many career avenues that were open but just not made known to the public. Like my professors, you know, they had a PhD and a veterinary degree. Oh, well, maybe I might like to do that too. And so I decided then to do graduate work for a PhD in pharmacology after I left veterinary school. So I was at the University of Illinois, and I stayed there to work in pharmacology because I thought it was a fine program. A serious effort in research was in graduate school after my veterinary degree. I had done library research, I had read about research, I had studied research, but I didn't have much involvement in any research projects while an undergraduate. I don't recall. Might have dabbled a bit with a professor, but wasn't really involved in any major way in any kind of research project. So that really came about afterwards. But I loved scientific inquiry, and I loved knowledge and developing knowledge, and the relationship between developing knowledge and applying it and seeing the improvement in society or agriculture or what have you. So I knew research was something that I really wanted to do. And I enjoyed my time in research. We had a great time, and we were a family too. We really worked very hard, very long hours. May I mention a name?
Yes.
For Dr. Richard Bevel, who is now retired from the University of Illinois, and he was really a fabulous leader and mentor. And he did a lot of work with pigs. He loved pigs, and he had grown up working with swine, you know, as an agricultural animal. And so we did pharmacological studies for drug residues in pigs, and so we worked with swine, and that was my first experience with swine. I really learned to appreciate them, and then had some that were pets, you know, that were like favorite individuals that had to live in the hallway because they were being picked on by their peers, you know, and they became very, very special animals. I'd had farm experience through the dairy farm, so, you know, pooping, you know, scooping poop, you know, was something that, you know, I knew about. And that was fine, you know, because raising animals, you know what they, you know, it's all biology. So, but in addition, we had the laboratory work of doing the analyses on blood or fecal samples, et cetera. That was very fascinating. And so, you know, I also developed those laboratory skills simultaneously with doing the animal work. Research was done by veterinarians. My mentor was a veterinarian. Other associates were veterinarians. So there was very much always on board the concept of analgesia and relief to the animals, but at the same time an understanding of their psychological needs. So, for example, when pigs had to be in a metabolism cage side by side, there were windows, actually openings, not just a window, an opening, where they could see each other and smell each other, and they were fairly close, and we knew that that was very reassuring to them. So even in those early days, and mind you, that was in the 1980s, that we were already very concerned about their enrichment, you know, and their psychological well-being, and you know, any feeling of pain or distress. So I felt that in that research environment, I really didn't feel that we were really causing undue pain or distress, and I was very comfortable with our role in that research. I really give great credit to our community for the evolution of animal welfare regulations and standards and principles that are, and they're not done yet evolving. They continue to evolve as we exchange information, as we learn more about the biology and about you know, how animals think or feel, et cetera, what they want in life. You know, we do a better and better job all the time. So I'm very pleased at how far our field has come. And it's really due to the dedication of many, many individuals within our field, not just veterinarians, of course, ethicists, researchers, technicians, managers, facility managers. And I'm sure I'm omitting lots of roles in that community, but there are many, many people that are all committed to humaneness to animals, but also committed to the biomedical research and its outcomes. That I give a really big thanks to everyone for how our field has developed.
A good mentor for you.
He was such a great leader and a great writer and a great thinker. I always admire that because it's always, writing has been very difficult for me. I continue to learn to write better all the time. And he was a man who could just sit back and think for an hour or so and then write perfectly in paper, you know, pen on paper, and write beautifully. He described the physical characteristics of one of our concrete buildings, and it was literature. you know, for as mundane a subject as it was. And he was truly a great writer, and he was very high-minded in his principles. We worked until 10 o'clock every night, including weekends, Saturdays, and Sundays. And if you were late coming in, he would call, "Are you coming in?" And it was almost like we kind of laughed like we were in like cow stanchions, you know, that we had to, you know, do our work. But he was very hard on himself and very high-minded and had great goals, and he wanted us to achieve great things. So I really thank him for that. I guess I carry out the some portion of the educational mission of AALAS. You know, what we're about is in supporting the humane use and responsible care and use of animals in research for the benefit of people and animals. And there are so many educational resources that we now provide to people in the field, not just our members, but really anyone in animal research. And that spans from books through online learning, so and with media in between. So we have technician training manuals that are our historical base of educational materials, but we've developed an anatomy atlas, we've developed techniques training books that can be used in facilities. We have an online learning platform called the AALAS Learning Library.
This is a new project, isn't it?
Well, it actually dated from 2003. It's when we went live with it, and we've been building courses ever since.
And were you the part of the design and development?
Yes, yes, and actually that stems from an online learning platform that was created by Mike Fallon and Stephanie Manuel, called researchtraining.org, and they were the creators. Mike had been an architect of that, and Stephanie was the programmer. And when I came to AALAS, I came to AALAS with the mission that I would create the analog to that at AALAS for AALAS training. And so in fact we worked with the same programmer, and we had an agreement and relationship with the Department of Veterans Affairs where Mike Fallon worked, Dr. Mike Fallon I should say. And we developed in the AALAS Learning Library. And we've had a reprogramming of it, because once in a while you have to reprogram your LMS with new coding standards. LMS refers to a learning management system. Mm-hmm. What we wanted to do is to provide training on several levels to the research field. For example, in researcher compliance with regulatory mandates, and we've met those. And also technician training. But it's like the acorn of a very large tree. 70 courses sounds like a lot. No, I'm sorry, did I say 70? 170. Oh my goodness. I'm bad at math, I guess, bad at counting. 170 courses. And yet, I think we need to have 1,000 or more before we really meet all our objectives. So it's a lifetime project. Mm-hmm. But we've met our objectives in that we've met the needs of many, many people. Mm-hmm. But we have more needs that need to be addressed. Mm-hmm. And so we're working towards that. For animal research related courses, I would say AALAS is the largest provider of those. And we bring in everyone from our membership. It isn't just a few people writing courses. We work together with bodies of experts to not only develop material, but then to review it and review it again and review it again. And so it really brings in the collaboration of people with their dedication to be as volunteers, but also the expertise that matches the topic. And so I think we're really in a great situation to develop training materials that will truly benefit this field.
And how many people have accessed the project since you've been?
Well, again, I'm not good at numbers, and here I miscounted the course from 70 to 170, but it's on the order of like over 100,000. And because a lot of institutions use it for their minimum compliance training for their personnel. So if they have 600 or 1,000 or several thousand people, they may be taking 1 or 2 courses on the AALAS Learning Library, often as an orientation to research compliance. So oftentimes institutions will have them do the online component and then have some face-to-face training to really develop the bonds and understanding. Currently there are some courses on careers in laboratory animal science and discussions on what biomedical research is all about. But many more courses need to be developed, and a committee associated with the AALAS Foundation is thinking along those lines. And so they're forging ahead with their plans. And many of us in this field go to schools. I've gone to schools in my locale and shown that movie as well. A movie on careers that we have that can be viewed from the foundation website. I also, we get letters all the time from people who, sometimes students, sometimes prisoners, who are looking, when they're going to be released, looking for a new career, inquiring about lab animal science as a career. So I'm really glad to receive those letters, and I respond to all of them.
Prisoners?
Yeah, prisoners, would you believe? Well, they're going to need a career too. And then I always, send them, a lot of times they're not going to have the web contact, they're not going to have the computer contact. So and especially I read the letters, because they might say that I don't have access to a computer or not, and some of them do, but I'm always trying to send lots of flyers so they have print materials. My life has been an interesting trajectory, and it's been unplanned. Some people go straight to the moon. It's a vertical rise, and every step is logically in that sequence of attaining that end objective, and they get it. Mine has been one of those trajectories. It kind of curves, it's going up, but it's always like turning to the left. So I've been fortunate to, in a sense, be pulled into opportunities that I didn't necessarily go looking for. And those opportunities, though, enriched me in many ways with new knowledge, new skills, new outlooks. And so when I was still a graduate school, I was recruited to go to Oregon State University as a faculty member on the College of Veterinary Medicine because a former fellow student was there on the faculty, and he, brought me in. And so I was there for some years, and then at that time, though, the Oregon Veterinary College was threatened with closure because of a proposition through the legislature, or proposition from the voters, rather, that changed the dynamics of how the tax base was used. And so through a series of budgetary steps, the veterinary college was basically eliminated, although saved at the 11th hour, I'm glad to say. And later in its future expanded. So, I mean, ultimately it was a very happy ending, and I'm delighted. But all the faculty got timely notices that the college would close and your job will be over. And I had been invited to give a seminar at Mallinckrodt Medical in St. Louis. And to my surprise, they offered me a job while I was there. I said, "Oh, thank you very much. I'm not interested." And so I went home, got my timely notice, called up and said, "Is that job still available?" Sure enough, it was. So I said, "Okay, I'll take it." And it was also good because at the time I was married to my husband, who had never been able to move to Oregon. We'd always thought he would, but he never was able to for reasons of his job and probably other factors in his life. So it brought me back into the same time zone. He was in Champaign, I was in St. Louis, but we're, a drive away. It wasn't that far. And so that was fun. And then it was supposed to be a research position. And then it was almost like it was a palace coup. And the director was removed. And suddenly we were doing safety testing. So it was a completely turnaround in what the job objectives were. But of course, once you're a corporate citizen, you do what you're told. It isn't, you really don't have an input in what the job is going to be. So I did not like that at all. I liked the company, I liked the people, I liked the place, but safety testing was, although very important, and I recognize how important it is, but gosh, was it boring. I couldn't, and I almost started to get a depression over it. I would have needed therapy. And then before I thought about then looking for another position, because that was starting to creep, I guess that was going to be my next thought, I got a job offer. And what had happened is that we had formed a consortium of veterinarians in the St. Louis area at the various biomedical research institutions. And it had been decided that one of the largest organizations in that consortium was Washington University in St. Louis. And it was decided that they would hire a training coordinator, and that coordinator would then also serve the consortium as well as Washington University. Well, we had interviewed somebody, and the job had been offered to her, and after accepting it, she later declined, reneged on the position. So the director, Dr. Steve Leary, was now suddenly without someone going to take that position. And I said, "Steve, if you're willing to maybe redefine that as a faculty position, I'd be glad to take it." And that gave him an idea, and so that's how it proceeded. And I basically transitioned over with a comfortable transition, because at Mallinckrodt they were having an AALAC inspection, so it was about to come up. So I finished their report. We had the AALAC inspection, and then I left after that. It was a very successful inspection. So it was really exciting to move over into a biomedical research environment. And so that was my start of biomedical research, away from animal research, where it was like, aimed towards veterinary medicine initially. Mallinckrodt was kind of that interim, but then Washington University was the start of biomedical research. That actually was my first exposure in a serious way to animal welfare ethics, because that was providing the training support for animal research compliance. And it was a very new, interesting area. And then while I was there, we were approached to do a multimedia project on biomethodologies in animals. And we were approached by a foundation. And at the same time, the Department of Veterans Affairs, Dr. Mike Fallon, also had a very similar funding for that same project from the Veterans Affairs. And we put our funds together and our projects together and collaborated. And so we actually developed a CD called Working with a Laboratory Dog. It was a very extensive video filming effort, and then we did other species, and we're just pulling together the video library to make that materials. And then Mike then started to do what became researchtraining.org, an online learning platform to instead of delivering these materials through CD, to deliver them through the web as a learning management system and a course management system. And so that was the start of everything. But so I started into biomedical research and animal welfare ethics, and then training, and then product development, educational resources, and that then AALAS, it came to their attention, of these materials, and I was approached to join AALAS staff. And at the time, I'd said, no, I really like what I'm doing here, et cetera. And then about a year later, they approached me again, and I said, it would be my opportunity. I tell you, they had developed an online learning platform that I didn't like at all, and nobody liked it. Hated it. It was an artifice. It was economically not viable. It didn't serve the content that the community needed. But it was a first attempt. It was an honorable attempt. But nevertheless, I thought, if I could go to AALAS, then maybe I could, kind of build a new researchtraining.org, but as an AALAS entity, and that's what became the AALAS Learning Library, and have it fit the needs, fit the requirements of the community, and then also provide the content that the community needed, and that was a lot of fun. We have a wonderful education manager who is truly my sister in developing the AALAS Learning Library. And I rely on her, and we're very, very close, and we complement each other so beautifully. And I also have a team of several people. Two of them are focused primarily on developing content in special areas and developing editorial skills. And we have another person who is a media developer who can just work with anything. Media-wise, and we've been wonderful. We have a person who's starting to help us in marketing. So it goes from, it's just been an expanding team, and it's a team that really operates very, very well. I love the people I work with. I love the place that I work at. I love what I do. I love the people that I serve, through AALAS, to not just the membership, but the greater research community. The animal research community has traditionally replied with the facts. And the animal rights people, who are on the other side of that dialogue, always respond with emotion. And it's the battle of emotion and facts, and guess which one wins? Because we are emotional creatures. And I'm not the one who've originated this idea. There's a colleague of mine who I will not name because, again, she hasn't signed, but maybe she will join your project someday. But in any case, she was absolutely right that as emotional creatures, we have to respond with emotion. And so I'm really pleased at what I'm seeing in the rise of a new generation of materials and resources aimed at the public that now bring in the emotional side of why this is important, why this work's important. And not that that hasn't always been there. It has been, like the poster of a patient at St. Jude. I remember a poster from a long time ago. So those things have been there, but they've not been the predominant message, I don't think. And, but now, like for example, the AALAS Foundation has a wonderful series of posters and showing the face of AALAS of a person loving and research animal and saying, we care for our animals so that, you can play in the sun, in terms of sun screening safety, and or that children can share hugs, not bugs, in terms of parasite control on animals. So there's so many good emotional messages, and I see people respond to that. That I've gone into the schools a few times, and when you speak with passion and you openly say, yes, I'm a veterinarian, I really care for these animals, and I was involved in, let's say, the clinical support of these animals, weekends and holidays, they got better care than, let's say, I've seen animals in the private sector, because I also happen to be a co-founder of a humane organization, and we didn't mention that, but so I've seen the seamy side of life, of how animals are truly neglected and abandoned and abused. I've seen that. There is no comparison. And so, for the research animals, we provide really excellent veterinary care and support. And for people to know that and to hear your passion and hear your reasons and the emotion through that, I think is a very powerful message. So, AALAS Foundation is not the only one that's doing that. I know AMP is doing that, Americans for Medical Progress, Foundation for Biomedical Research. Everyone is capturing the emotional aspect of why this is important. And I'm really pleased to see that. I think it's one of the most persuasive arguments. Facts are always important, and they ought to be there somewhere, but they're not necessarily that first message that one should encounter. I'll sit beside somebody in a shuttle or in a plane, whatever, and if the discussion comes up about what do I do and so forth, and animals in research, and aren't they harmed or whatever, and just telling them about the veterinary care that's provided them is so unknown by people, and yet so reassuring when they learn it. They're not against biomedical research, they just want the animals taken care of well. And that's understandable, so do I. So does everybody. I'm really proud of our work at AALAS. Every one of us as staff, we really do so much we really believe in the field of animal research and what people are doing. And our members are amazing. I've worked with some of the most amazing people on various collaborative projects. So all our educational resources, not the least of which, they're all fantastic. So, they're fantastic in the sense that people have brought their minds together, they're reviewing it, they're very carefully analyzing it, they're trying to make it better and better and better and better before it gets launched, and then we take such pride in every element. So I can't really point to any one thing as wow, that's the greatest thing in my life, and I can die now, but I guess, I happen to have gone to a conference last week on learning solutions. It was a great conference. And there was a talk by Bob Ballard, who you probably know of him as the oceanographer. And I'd had the opportunity to see him like about 20 years ago at another conference. And so I was really pleased to kind of catch up with all that there's doing. And one thing in a film that they played a short video strip, and he said, people always ask me, what was my greatest discovery? And of course, they're expecting me to say the Titanic. But the greatest discovery is the one that's about to happen. So it's really looking forward to the next thing and not looking back.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And I think that truly captures the moment. I was both the chair and the attendant veterinarian, and then later we recognized there was a conflict of interest, and we separated those two roles. But that was in the late, about 91, 92. So those are the early days of developing the standards and the criteria and the understandings of how to run an IACUC. And so it was all right. We had work to do, and we did it. I enjoyed it, and We did some meaningful reviews of our work and had some meaningful discussions. I remember changing anesthesia. At that time, one of my early tasks was to design a surgical suite and upgraded their use of anesthesia. We had a discussion on that in the IACUC meeting, and people went away from that feeling that it was a very worthwhile discussion and a worthwhile change. So that was good. My family is very understanding of science, and they thought I would become a scientist, you know, like a veterinarian and scientist. And I was a scientist for a while, and then I, you know, migrated on. But I don't think there's any real issues with them about the use of animals in research. I think they have just, they're well-read people, they're well-informed, and so I think they're just simply aware of the issues. I don't remember even having discussed it with them, really. Mm-hmm. And then my daughter, and I went to her school. She was not able to be present that day, but I had a very interesting discussion at the school. And I really felt that they were very accepting of animal research and recognizing what it had done, what it had accomplished. Even some that impacted them directly. It was a very powerful session that we had. I don't know if you want to hear about it, but it's it relates. My daughter was at a school where a lot of children have some maybe sleep issues because of mental health issues and so forth, and I realized later that oftentimes people with behavioral and mental health issues often don't sleep well, you know, and that contributes to their problems. Well, I happened to have like a pre-screening CD of a show, David Suzuki's Nature of Things, because the research, animal research that was presented there was funded by AALAS through our Grants for Laboratory Animal Science program that I'm a director of. And so Bob very kindly sent me that pre-screening video with the permission to use it in various training sessions. And so I took it to that school, and they were marvelously attuned to it because it talked about the biology of our sleep and how light at night, or the pollution of light in our nighttime environment, affects the quality of our sleep, affects the hormones of melatonin. And then we talked about it. The show included ways in which you can control that in your own personal life. And the children found it extremely important. And I realized this really spoke to them. But that show included my friend Bob and his mentor in some clips that showed the rats, you know. And so I could really make that case to them that animal research proved this theory, and really, you know, made it possible for them to have this information now. And we all talked about different ways that we can kind of control the light in our bedroom at night. You know, I mean, really, it came down to that. And that was a very, very powerful message. And I look forward to going back again, because I had suggested, if you'd like, I can come back and we can talk about animal research ethics. And they were, you know, very enthusiastic about that. I've been coming here to Primer since about the mid-90s. Every year, I've not missed a year. And I would say this is one of my favorite conference venues because it's like coming home. And I've known so many people since those early years. It's like we're growing old together. And plus, I enjoy the networking format that is the hallmark of this conference. It's developed a culture of interactivity that by design. And I remember the early years that interactivity was not so automatic as it is today. And I'm really glad to see that because it creates a great discourse on any topic. But, you know, this conference focuses on the various trends and regulations, but I don't see necessarily that there's been an evolution. It's just that it's always an open marketplace of ideas, you know, and how can you get better than that? That I don't have my hands on the pulse necessarily of what will go on in science, but I have faith in technology. I'm always amazed at what we can accomplish technologically. I may not have the imagination to see past that horizon as some people might, but I think that things will get better, that techniques will get more refined. For example, I'm just amazed at what they've accomplished with brain imaging to track the physical changes in the brain under various conditions and various disorders, like mental health disorders. Gosh, you know, who knows where we'll go from here? So I simply applaud the scientists for continuing the work that they do, and I have full faith and optimism, confidence in what will come about. Will animal research go away? I don't think so. I think there'll always be important roles for using animals in research, and I'm really glad to be able to know that animal research will continue, because that's, I think, what is preserving the quality of our health. We need that research component to prove, to verify, to justify, to explain, you know, the cures and the conditions that we have to wrestle with. I guess I would say that if only animal research was so well understood and so well accepted in society that it was commonplace on the news. And oftentimes it's like very secretive. You know, it is the missing component of any kind of medical accomplishment, and that is our own fault, I think, as a field. But I really applaud the efforts of so many people in our field, not just the AALAS Foundation, as I say, these other groups that I've named, Americans for Medical Progress, Foundation for Biomedical Research, and many others, who are creating resources that are available on the web, accessible to people. As more and more of those materials are provided, get more commonplace, and then fill in the various gaps, addressing the emotional issues as well as the facts, I think maybe eventually that might come to the attention of the news media, and then the news media themselves might tap that as a balancing counterpart to some story about biomedical research milestone. But that's what I would like to see. I'm really pleased to be part of this. I hope that it's of some value to somebody someday.